Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, I apologize that I cannot be with you on the occasion of this, the third UNITAR-Yale Conference on Environmental Governance and Democracy. The topics you have chosen, from environmental sustainability, human rights, the post-2015 development agenda and the climate change regime, certainly provides a very rich menu for a debate and reflection on where the agenda and the narrative and also the discourse on human rights and the environment is likely to evolve. At this very moment in time, the world is struggling in many respects, both with what is happening around us, but also with a narrative and a common agenda that unifies nations and communities rather than divides them along the lines of either traditional interests or newly divergent interests that are emerging. The debate around human rights and the environment in many ways symbolizes and also reflects the dissonance that sometimes exists, particularly in the multilateral context, when we try and link different arenas of action and also discourse, such as human rights and the environment. We in the United Nations Environment Programme are very much part of the United Nations overall effort to pursue and also to advocate and support countries in taking a rights-based approach towards development, sustainable development, and in our particular context of UNEP, the environment. Indeed, in recent years, particularly through the World Congress on Justice, which was held in the margins of the Rio+20 summit, but also our work with the judiciary involving chief justices, prosecutors, attorneys general, we have tried to give an expression not only to the foundations of an environmental rule of law, but also to examine more carefully how a rights-based approach is practically implementable, how it can be invoked by citizens vis-à-vis their governments, or where conflicting interests exist between parties in a society, that a rights-based approach becomes a foundation that recognizes that the environment is no longer a luxury or indeed something that is a second thought when it comes to development decisions. The notions of a healthy environment, the right to a healthy environment, but also some of the fundamental principles of modern environmental discourse, be it the precautionary principle or be it the polluter pay principle, are elements that have found in many different realities and contexts their way into law and legislation. Indeed, as the UN begins to revisit also the debate around the rule of law, the dimension of the environmental rule of law has emerged as a very important focus for our work in UNEP. First of all, we should recognize that the international community has over the last 40 to 50 years established a very significant body of environmental law, and therefore also the foundations for citizens or any actor in our societies to invoke justice based on legislation that has been passed by parliaments and therefore forms part of the legislative context within which rights can be secured, invoked and defended. However, as we also know, the debates around human rights and the environment are often characterized by a set of concerns that the definition of human rights may be universal in the context of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights of the United Nations, and yet in the particular context of countries there is often a dispute as to their application and also their interpretation. It is part of our task and duty, but also our opportunity, I believe, that both through the conference that you are now holding, but also the work of the United Nations more broadly and of many actors at national level, to continue to defend the notion that a right to a healthy environment is not something that is at the disposition of a particular party or a particular government at a particular moment in time. It should be part of the fundamental rights that any of us as citizens, wherever we live across the world, should be able to both aspire to and invoke in due course. The work that we have done in recent years, also in the context of the World Congress on Justice, has tried to both understand the evolving body of environmental law, as well as to examine more carefully how it is in different societies, traditional contexts and also governance contexts, that notion of human rights and the environment can be evolved further in terms of practical application. Our work also with the Office of the Commissioner for Human Rights and the independent expert on human rights and the environment, and his work that is currently underway and will culminate in a report in March 2015, offer significant opportunities for all of us to both learn lessons, appreciate where some of the greatest challenges will lie, and also be able to perhaps create a more multi-layered discourse and discussion on this issue that will allow different entry points for different societies with different priorities also. Certainly, the issue of human rights in the environment is one that transcends virtually every aspect of our society. Some of our scientific work in UNEP with many experts and scientists around the world, and also our sister organization WHO, for example, has pointed to the fact that indoor and outdoor pollution is estimated to kill or at least lead to premature death every year of more than 7 million people. It's a staggering number. But it is not only in the context of indoor and outdoor air pollution that we are faced with major challenges. Also issues such as ecosystem management, sustainability is a critical part of our work today, where a rights-based approach is extremely important. Whether we take the issue of degradation of land or the loss of tropical forests, or indeed the issues of oil pollution, for instance, in a study that UNEP conducted 3 years ago in the Niger Delta of Nigeria, where communities have been affected for well over 3 decades by an absolutely extraordinary amount of pollution and destruction of their living environment. How do we approach these issues, both in a national context in terms of rights that people and communities have? How do we begin to evolve our legislation also in such a way that, first of all, these things do not happen in the future, that those who pollute are held accountable for it, but that we also take one step further. And this speaks, in a sense, to the agenda that UNEP has been very proactive in trying to bring into the international discourse on development and sustainable development. The notion of a transition towards a green economy depends in many respects also on the legislative environment, which can try to codify both objectives, aspirations, but also economic realities. For instance, the emergence of renewable energy as a major new window of opportunity to address our energy needs in the future and also reduce our carbon dioxide emissions in many ways depends on a different interpretation to a right to a healthy environment, and therefore the economic signals that we send into markets. These economic decision-making processes ultimately depend on legislation and policy. So here is another dimension that we should not underestimate, and that I believe will become ever more central in the political discourse in our countries across the world. Let me end by saying that our work on good practices in the domain of human rights and the environment that we are pursuing together with the Office of the Commissioner of Human Rights, but also with many other partners, is our commitment alongside the World Congress on Justice, the network that we have now established with the judiciary, and much of the work that we do at national and international level to either assist countries in developing new national legislation or indeed new international instruments such as the Minamata Convention on Mercury, represent a significant part of what the United Nations can bring both to the international efforts that require collaborative work, but also to the protection of the rights of citizens at country, at community level. It will never be for the United Nations to impose a national set of rights or indeed laws, but it is the role and the responsibility of the international community and of entities such as UNEP to continuously remind ourselves that the principle upon which we built the foundations of the United Nations is a rights-based approach, and we are here to defend every citizen's right to a healthy environment and ultimately also to a sustainable development process that is both at the national level and international level dependent upon both law and its effective enforcement. Thank you very much, and I very much look forward to receiving the outcomes of this, the third conference, and indeed our colleagues from UNEP will be participating in the meeting. Please be bold, please be visionary, and above all, give us the directions that we need in order to involve actors across all aspects of society when it comes to environment, human rights, and governance. Thank you.